Hello, everyone, and welcome to FECast, the official podcast of Friends of Eternal. I am your host, Sunyveil, and I'm joined by my co-host, recently promoted, Stormblessed. What's up, my dude?
Woo! I'm now the co-host. I will co-host all over this podcast.
What the heck does that even mean?
It means whatever you want it to mean.
All right, it's in there. All right, so it's been a while since we've had a news edition of FECast, and boy, do we have some exciting details to share with you. We have a new set coming out on June 23rd, Argent Depths, and we don't have any concrete information about an ECQ, but we suspect that it's either going to be the weekend following the set's release or perhaps the weekend after that.
We do know about the Summer Quarterly Championship dates, though. You know, the ones that are happening like 4 months down the line. You know, not the one that's happening this month, but the one happening 4 months from now. So we do know that information. But yes, the new set's coming out. It is called Argent Depths. It's taking place in an alternate version of Myria created out of Vara's Nightmares. And as always, there's a special bundle deal available with lots of Eternal packs and gems and draft tickets if you buy it from their website directly, plus a alternate art Roland. So that's going to be cool. So you can get that coming up, I guess, starting Wednesday or whenever this comes out. So there'll be that day. But it was supposed to be today. We're recording on Tuesday, but the draft preview and the pre-release bundle are delayed a day. So we can't discuss the draft preview cards, but we will discuss the other things, including a balance patch that happened, which is a big deal.
Yeah, so I think that the patch that a lot of people were looking for, addressing Jack, Turn to Seed, and Aurelian Supplier, well, those cards are staying the same. They did spend some time talking about those cards. If you would like to go ahead and read how they felt about those cards and why they didn't touch them yet, I strongly recommend doing so. The link will be in the description. But we do see a lot of cards being shaken up, mostly buffs, but a few key nerfs, especially to Fire and Expedition. Yeah. So Jack stays untouched. It's still going to be fantastic, and for the Throne ECQ that's coming up, I'm sure it's going to be still a mighty force to be reckoned with.
I think that it's kind of telling, though, that Daryl seems to be doing the whole nerf around things, like not nerfing Turn to Seed Aurelian Supplier with the reasons they gave makes sense. Like, if you read the Aurelian Supplier reasoning, it's that, you know, is that it's not too powerful, but exacerbating play draw issues could be an issue, and that it might be too powerful in Expedition, and you can see this play out because they didn't, you know, nerf anything around it, right? Turn to Seed it well. But with not nerfing Jack, it's kind of like they nerfed 4 mono fire cards, fire aggro cards, rather than trying to nerf Jack, which kind of feels like nerfing Sodia's Spell Shaper rather than Even-Handed Golem. Although, again, in that Sodia Spell Shaper's case, Spell Shaper also deserved a nerf itself. So, shrug.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of these cards were really kicking some serious butt.
Yeah.
So, for the 4 cards that were nerfed are Totem Pioneer, Thunder of Wings, Phoenix Stone, and Pyro Elemental, 3 of which I was playing in my deck for the Throne Championship, and all these cards are mainstays in the Expedition Fire decks, absolutely seeing a ton of play. Totem Pioneer, I think, exceeded most people's expectations with just how powerful it was. It's now a 1/1. Thunder of Wings also probably exceeded a lot of expectations, now creates a 4/1 flyer. Both those will die to Snowball, and I personally like these changes. Those cards are still have the ceiling that they had, but their floor is lower, so like they still have the power potential, but they are easier to deal with now.
Yeah, I think the Totem Pioneer nerf is more impactful than the Thunder Wings nerf because, you know, obviously Blight Moth takes out both of them now, but, you know, Totem Pioneer doesn't get as much value immediately more often than Thunder Wings, which Thunder Wings will still be able to attack for 4 always, and, you know, there's, well, it can trade with a 1x flyer now, like a Humbug. You know, there's not as many of those as, 2x flyers, so it still does roughly the same thing, but it's weaker, to get in multiple hits of 4, which is important. The biggest nerf is probably Pyro Elemental because it's basically kills the card once again. The card will never see any play anymore.
Yeah. So Pyro Elemental, now its cost is reduced by 3 when you play a spell, so it costs 3 after you play a spell. And Phoenix Stone, as you're getting to, now costs 1 to play, but 3 to activate. So the total cost for the first activation is the same, but it costs 1 more for every activation after that.
And it is so much worse. Like, for one thing, 7 is a lot more than 6, but also having to pay 3 on your next turn rather than 2 is a big deal. Like, wow, this card just... I mean, the only upside for it is that it can see play and Condemn, markets now in Stone Scar decks, but boy, is this card just so much worse than it was before. Which is funny because when it was released, no, I would never have thought this card would have gotten nerfed. Like, I remember a streamer that I watched crafted a playset of these. It was the first thing he crafted was 4 copies of this card, and the deck was awful. The card was just garbage, and it's getting nerfed now.
Well, I was actually pretty optimistic about the card. I don't know if I crafted 4 immediately, but you look at these types of effects that can avoid sweepers and has initiative. I think it also, when it was released, it cost 3 and then 2 to activate, if I recall correctly.
They did buff it at one point.
Yeah, so like the idea behind the card, having this 4 attack unit that dodges sweepers, I think is a powerful concept, and it's just a matter of getting the numbers right. I think this is also a sneaky nerf to Blazing Salvo, right? Phoenix Stone and Pyro Elemental were in a lot of Blazing Salvo markets, almost all of them in Expedition. Well, actually, was Pyro Elemental an Expedition?
No, Pyro Elemental was not an Expedition, but it did see play in basically every aggressive fire market.
Yeah. So I mean, again, Blazing Salvos just shows up as like one of the most common market cards that we have, which makes sense because, I mean, Fire was just, the best faction. It's Fire's market card. So toning it down even a bit more.
So they also gave us a number of buffs, some of which are more inconsequential, some of which matter more. Importantly, we now have a number of new cards joining the venerated deal of the Bold Adventurer stat line, the best stat line in the game. We are slowly moving to a point where every card will be a Bold Adventurer. Currently, the best card in the game is Bold Adventurer Jack, and we have this is just quick memeing, but we have Snowdrift Delver and Fencing Master both becoming 2/3s, neither of which matters, but they do get the Bold Adventurer stat line, which is a nice, strong deal. But as far as actual relevant buffs go, we have the Heralds. There's the Northwind Herald and the Southwind Herald both got a buff, the Northwind being the more impactful one. It's now a 4/2, was a 3/2. It is the 6-cost flyer that is free, which means that includes influence cost, if you've played 2 or more spells this turn. And Southwind Herald gets an extra point of toughness, and the ultimate unit is now a 10/10, which is just like the biggest deal. I mean, who could possibly win when that big old other unit was a 9/9? Come on, ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, if your opponent had all 4 Seers in hand, well, now it survives all 4 of them. In case they didn't want to kill one of the units on its own. So that's a combination of Southwind Herald being buffed to a 3/3 and Northwind Herald being buffed to a 4/2. You need to have all those stats add up. And also, I think going along with that, Skyward Seer got a buff. It only costs 3 instead of 4 now. And that can search up each of these heralds. But it's worth noting that, as interesting as that sounds, it still costs about the same as Dragonforge, but it's conditional and it doesn't cause the cost reductions. So, temper your expectations.
However, it is far better tempo than Dragonforge in a lot of ways, because a 1/3 body is a pretty big deal. Like, having extra adding a body to Dragonforge. Like, if Dragonforge was a 1/1 unit or whatever, it would be absurd, right? So the real problem with Skyward Seer has basically always been it's too expensive. So now that part's kind of been solved. But Spark is actually surprisingly difficult to achieve in a lot of ways. When they made Onslaught was fixed Spark in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So Onslaught was fixed Spark because Spark was just hard to achieve reliably, where Onslaught's better because you can always guarantee it being active even if the opponent, blocks or removes your unit when you attack. So the Spark part's the real awkward part there. But we have another, I think a pretty big buff is Noxious Wyvern going to 6. Like, I like that card at 7, especially off Dragonforge. Now it makes it 5 off Dragonforge. Like, whoo.
Yeah, that seems very relevant to me. Noxious Wyvark is the dragon that gives -3/-3 to all units without flying when it as a summon effect. And if you Dragonforge for it, now it costs 5. You're probably not playing more than one of these in the deck for the most part, so almost all the time you're getting it off Dragonforge. So now it went from costing 6 to costing 5, and it's really good anti-aggro option out of these dragon decks.
I mean, I could see playing more of these now than just one. Like, before you played one because it was so expensive, right? But now, compare it to Malaise, right? It costs 2 more than Malaise, but you get a 3/4 flyer attached to it. So I could see playing a couple more of them. So the next card, Suny put down, but I have reliable sources tell me is the actual worst card in the game, Extoll's Pendant. Used to cost 2, now costs 1. It is the relic that gives you +3 power, but all cards in your hand also cost 3.
Three more.
So I don't know why Suny put it here, so I'm going to ask him, Suny, why do you think Extoll's Pendant is a notable buff?
Well, I mean, it's just one of those cards that has the potential to be broken. It's probably not broken with the cards that are in the game right now, but it's the type of thing that could pop up down the line once it has the proper support. If there's some way to get Glimpse Workshop going, and then you play Extoll's Pendant from your market or something, you can, that 3 power could go a long way. It's definitely not changing anything anytime soon, but I think it's one of those cards that you should keep an eye out for.
So the thing that I wanted actually Extoll's Pendant was I wanted it to cost 2, but I wanted to give +4 power rather than +3 power, because at least it would kind of function like before you start comping off as like a bastard Power Stone, right? Where it's like if you play one spell a turn, you at least get a Power Stone effect. Where it's like, it's still awful because you can't play 2 cards a turn, but at least if you play 1 card a turn, it does something a little bit. It still limits you greatly, but it kind of balances slightly. So that's where I wanted to see it go. But the next buff is actually pretty huge actually. It's Extoll, Champion of Grodov. It used to be 6 time, and it had a power and toughness equal to your total power. And every time a unit died, you played a power randomly from your deck. But now it costs 5 and a single time. That's right. 1 less power and 2 less influence. Suny, what are your thoughts on Extoll, Champion of Grodov now?
So I think the key here is time generally suffers with its removal. It doesn't have very good removal, and if it costs triple time, then you're slotted into a heavy time deck, and this is a card that really wants to be removing your opponent's units. So if you can put it in, say, like a Xenon deck, you can get a lot of value off of it if you play this, and then if you get to untap it with it, you get to use all sorts of removal on your opponent's units and just get a power for each one. I think that whenever I saw this card in play, I thought that it did a lot, but obviously the difficulty was getting it into play. It's not as good as Worldbearer Behemoth is, but I think it's along the same lines as a 5-drop that is pretty good if you get to survive a turn with it, and can yet generate value as it stays in play. But I certainly don't think it's going to see any play in Throne, but it's pretty interesting for Expedition. So Harga, the Minotaur that was a 0/8 and helps your units achieve mastery by saying whenever you play a unit, it does damage equal to its attack to Harga. Now costs 2, and that's pretty interesting. I don't know how good it's going to be, but 2 for 0/8, if you can make its abilities relevant, I think it'll be a pretty good anti-aggro card.
I mean, it's clearly a nerf though, because if you play Spire Shadows, it used to be a 0 cost 3/8, now it's just a 0 cost 2/8. So I mean, what's Darryl doing thinking they're buffing cards when they're clearly nerfing them?
Oh my god.
Anyways, so yeah, the card's interesting. I think that you do want some way to buff it, right? Just playing a 0/8 with no other abilities is not really want to be, but if you can start buffing it, it can be a relatively good threat, right? Getting +2/+2 in Killer, especially if you're some kind of Minotaur tribal deck, is pretty big actually, because Killer's a huge effect, and making this thing a 2/10 would be huge, especially if you like Obelisk and it's like a 3/10. So that would be like a 3/11 or whatever. So that's surprisingly big.
It's still garbage against control decks, but I think
sure.
I think it's one to keep an eye out, because we don't have any 2-cost 0/8. So just as a vanilla unit on its own, it's doing something that we don't have yet.
Didn't we already have a 3-cost 0/8 though? Vanilla 0/8 for 3 Injustice?
Yeah, we had Shield Guy, as I always like to call it.
Shield
there was
Guy.
a Justice card. I played that in draft. Yeah, it's a Minotaur.
I like that 2-cost 0/4 flyer before they nerf that. But it is. Enough about draft. You guys aren't here for old draft cards. You're here for spoilers. Yes, that's right. We have spoiler seasons upon us.
We're going to pause for just a moment to get some plugs in. Hey, what's up? Editing Sunyveil here. Just wanted to say that if you're not already a part of the Friends of Eternal Discord, it is the best place to stay tuned with competitive Eternal and get better. There are so many people in the Discord that are happy to help you out if you are looking for any sort of advice on decks, on gameplay and whatnot. And if you would like to improve your gameplay specifically, we do have the Piloting Club channel, and I am trying to revive this. And basically, it goes like this. If you would like some commentary on your games and you drop a link to a video of your gameplay in the Piloting Club channel in the Friends of Eternal Discord, I will personally review it and critique it and give as much feedback as I can. Additionally, FECast and Friends of Eternal would not be possible without our generous patrons over at patreon.com. If you would like to help support the show, you can go to patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. A huge thanks to Outside Bava, Yeast Out, D-Dub, Chrissier, Chamomilk, Sigma Tank, and Work Done Son for their support of FECast. All right, that's all the plugs for now. Let's get back to the show.
And we have a bunch of really exciting cards, starting with our new market card of the set. Obviously, every set now is giving us a new way to explore the market, and this set is no exception. This time we are getting an uncommon way to use the market. Yes, that's right. For future charity peasant tournaments that Jedi puts on, or any sort of event that is in the Direwolf client. And also just for budget reasons, we now have the Etching Cycle, one etching for each of the 5 factions. Each etching is 1 cost spell, not fast spell, which requires the influence of its respective type, and it draws a sigil from your deck of that type. And if you have 4 influence, you may exhaust a unit in play that shares a faction type with it to draw a card, to swap a card from your market. So basically, if the Primal one, if you have a Primal unit in play and 4 Primal influence, you get to draw a Primal sigil from your deck, and then you can even swap the Primal sigil you just drew from your deck with a Primal card from your market, which is really powerful. It's very limiting, right? You have to be hard into a faction, right? You can't play it in like a 5 faction deck, or probably even 3 faction decks, really. And you also have to have the right units. So you need to either have multi-faction units or, single faction units of the specific type. But if you can play them, they are really powerful, because being able to go into the market for 1 cost, as we've seen with market spells, has been really, really good. And in this case, you aren't limited by cost or even by cards in the hand, right? The problem with like Transpose is that it often felt like you were 2 for 1ing yourself. But this card is not. It's just going to the market and grabbing your best Primal spell.
Yeah, these are really interesting. And I wouldn't be surprised if they saw Jedi's Tournament and were knocked the rarity down from rare in order to, give these to future events that might not allow for rares. That might be just coincidental or whatever, but these cards are very powerful. I mean, being able to, in the late game, trading a power to the market is exactly what you want to do, and this does exactly that. Gets you that power. And otherwise, it's worst case scenario, if you're already fixed for that faction, you get a power, which is, you're playing lots of power in your deck. You want that.
The big downside between these versus Seek Power is that they don't fix your power, right? But if you build your deck properly, per se, you can play either you play this and Seek Power, right? Which I don't think is necessarily a bad move, especially because if you're planning on using these for the market influence, right, then you don't really care about the power effect so much. But, just playing 33 power is probably good in even like mid-range decks. So like getting an excuse to play more power in your decks, giving people an excuse to build better decks, I think is a wonderful thing. Play 4 C powers and 4 of these in your like Xenon mid-range deck or whatever, play the extra power because you need power. And this card allows you to play power and not play power at the same time. So it's a really good card.
Yeah, it's a power when you need it, and it's something else when you need it. So something that I really like about this is it doesn't get the card based off of its cost, right?
Yes.
So like the previous market cards that we have, the 1 cost market cards, for example, it could be difficult to find time market cards that were good for the early game. And I think that something about markets is that you want to have cards that are good for various situations in the game, and that includes having cards that are good early and cards that are good late. And usually the ones that are good early are inexpensive, and the ones that are good late are expensive, and this can get either of them. And that wasn't necessarily something you could do with the
original market spells.
Yeah, the original market spells.
So the other thing is that these cannot be used in unitless decks. Not really, because in order to use them effectively, you have to have a unit in play of the same faction. So you can't. If you're playing no units, these are just worse Seek powers. So that's a pretty important note. So it encourages unit play, which is nice. Another thing is that I like them because they encourage you to build worse markets in Sunny's view, because you shouldn't be putting power in your market if you're playing etchings. Because what's the point of playing power in the market if you're playing an etching, right? Because if you play, I'm gonna swap my sigil for a banner,
Well, in a way, it's forcing people to build their decks better because of what you said. Because now you can just get the power.
Yeah, but I hope to see people play these with Seek powers and not just by themselves. But I expect them to just play it by themselves because people are greedy. But moving on, we have some new multi-faction powers. These are vows. Each one I'll read the Praxis Vow just for example, but all of them do the same thing just with different factions. Praxis Vow: you may discard a fire or time sigil from your deck, not your hand, to gain an influence of that type, and you take 1 damage. In this set, we have Praxis, Stonescar, Combray, Huru, and Feln. So no other 5 factions, just those 5. But each of them is really powerful. So if you don't, if you have all your influence, right? If you don't need any influence fixing, you can just play it as an influenceless power that's undepleted and not take any damage. Otherwise, you can play it, take 1 damage, and fix for one of 2 factions. Also, it has another huge benefit of putting a card into your void. This is huge for cards like Bloodseeker, Torgov, Forgotten Find. You know, if you play like Praxis Vow, Forgotten Find, then on your next turn you play, you know, regular Sigil, and then you can have 5 power on turn 3. That's huge. So these cards are insane. They're undepleted. They are, if you know Magic the Gathering, their closest equivalent there would be fetch lands. And if you know Magic the Gathering, you know that fetch lands are absurd. So I fully expect these to be busted. And they're not even rare, actually. I just noticed this. They are uncommon.
Yeah, the big difference between these and fetch lands, however, is that fetch lands will get you both of your influences.
Yes.
I mean, if it's a direct comparison.
No, that's
But,
true.
you know, something else you can do is if you were playing, for example, a Praxis deck, you'd think that, oh, I can only play the Praxis Vow. Well, that's not entirely true. You get to play the Praxis Vow, the Stonescar Vow, and the Combray Vow. Sure, the Stonescar Vow and Combray Vows only get 1 faction and hurt you, but if you're relying on something like the Hourglass or Forgotten Find, you know, that might be really worth it. You might have, you know, a lot more ways of putting power in your void to get that quick ramp effect. So I think these are exciting cards. We'll see what they're able to do.
I think this is the second best dual faction power in the game. I think the best cycle was the Insignias. I think Insignias are clearly the best powers in the game. And I think these are second, but they might even be first. You know, some people say that crests are better, but I think crests are slightly overrated anyways. Crests are obviously powerful, but I think these are just in another level. They've got so much going on, being undepleted, fixing, like unconditional undepleted, right? They're always undepleted no matter what. So the only thing that they don't do is as far as being dual faction is they don't give you 2 factions, right? So like, which is slightly awkward considering our next couple of spoilers. And a theme of the set seems to be going really deep into factions. So not being able to produce 2 of a faction is going to be relevant. So, for example, we have a legendary some kind of cycle, but it's unclear exactly how it's going to function. But basically, there's a bunch of cards that cost 4, and they're going to have a influence cost of X, 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 Y, Y. So 4 of one influence, 2 of the other. So the first one is we have a new Roland. He is the same cost, same influence. He is 4 Justice, 2 Shadow for a 2/5 Decay Endurance. And when an enemy unit dies, play a 1/1 Silverblade Reaper with Flying and Deadly. Then Roland gets +1/+1. Now, just to clarify, Decay means that Roland does his damage to relic weapons and units as -1, -1 effects. So if he hits a unit, he does -2, -2 to it. If he hits a relic weapon, the relic weapon takes 2 attack and 2 armor off of itself. So Roland seems like the close comparison in our game would be Statuary Maiden, which is another card that triggers when a unit dies. And I think Roland is actually very powerful. The big problem with it is obviously his influence.
Yeah, so what happens if you curve Roland into a harsh rule? You get the silver, what are they called? Silverblade Reapers, right?
Yeah, you would. I think you get the Silver Reapers. I mean, you don't even do that. You could just Roland into, cast into Shadow, decimated, get 2 Reapers. Roland's now a 4/7 endurance. And of course, being an X5, that means Roland is immune to Jack, which is a big deal. Having endurance means it's immune to permafrost.
I mean, the potential is definitely there. It's entirely dependent on having a deck that can get the influence, right? And I think that's going to be true of all of these cards. No matter how much they jump out of the page with their abilities, it's going to be a matter of how easily can you get their influence. And I mean, that just relies on so many things that it's hard to say whether, this is going to see a lot of play or not.
Well, the obvious, I feel like the obvious already thing we can compare to in the current state of Eternal is Feln decks with Felrock, right? Because Felrock decks are the sort of epitome in Eternal of pushing as hard influence as you can as fast as possible without playing Argent Stranger or something, or Feln Stranger, right? So I feel like that's the comparison here.
Yeah, but Felrock you get for free, and it makes your opponent discard a card. So I think like Felrock is significantly better. But
No. What I mean is that because the goal of Felrock is to get Primal 3 Shadow on turn 3, right? And this is the get 4 Justice 2 Shadow on turn 4. So I'm saying as far as influence is concerned, as far as getting the influence as soon as possible. That's what I mean as far as comparing to Felrock. Not necessarily its power level, but like its influence cost. The other comparison to note is Aramont. New Aramont, the 4-cost Aramont with 4 Shadow, who's like, oh man, he's so hard to play. You can really have to play mono Shadow with like 1, Justice Sigils your splash. These cards are harder to play than Aramont, because Aramont just costs 4 Shadow. This is 4 Justice plus 2 extra Shadows. So all these cards are harder to play than Aramont. So but you do get a good reward for this though. So
it would be really difficult to play these in a 3-faction deck. I think that if you're trying to play it in a 3-faction deck, it's going to be really ambitious. Let's go on to the next one. This one I like a lot. Diana Faith Shield. It's also quadruple justice, also costs 4, double time. It's a 2/4 flying, summon, draw a card, you gain 2 health and 2 armor. Ultimate, pay 12 to give Diana plus attack and health equal to your total influence. So she's going to become really big if you can get up to 12. I like this card. I think it's a neat little value play. It does a little bit of everything, right? It replaces itself. It plays defense pretty okay. It can attack into things because it has flying. Again, it's all about the influence. Is this card going to be able to fit into a deck?
In some ways, I think Diana is better than Roland, because Roland really wants you to stick him on turn 4 or 5, right? Well, so Roland's okay if you play him later, because and maybe that's the point of a lot of these cards, is that they're okay if you play them later as well. Because if you play Roland later, you can play it and a removal spell in the same turn to get value. Whereas Diana gets value if you play it later. Just drawing card, gaining health is just going to be decent at any point in the game, right? If you play it on turn 6, that's fine. It's going to gain you health, it's going to draw you a card, later you play it the closer you are to its ultimate as well, which could be relevant, right? If you ultimate it on 12, you're probably going to have like 16 influence or something,
yeah, an absurd amount.
And while its ultimate probably won't come up that much, it's not irrelevant either, especially in Combre, which you might not know this, Suny, but Combre is known for their ramping abilities.
Okay. Yeah, I think that if we're just comparing power levels, I think that Diana is better just because it's so unconditional. It's just good in every situation, basically. All right. Next one in the cycle that we have is Rindra Infiltrator, quadruple shadow, double primal. It's a 2/3 +4/+4 in lifesteal if you've played a spell this turn. Summon, the enemy player discards a card of their choice from your hand. It's kind of like a mirror effect of Diana, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's certainly interesting. I mean, if your opponent has 2 answers to Rindra, it might not be the most insane play. But if they only have 1 answer, then all of a sudden they're going to take 6 lifesteal if they don't.
So I think Rindra is actually absurd potentially absurd. It's hard to truly say any of these are absurd because of their influence, right? Because we do. But I also kind of trust Direwolf that they're not going to make sort of the marquee cards of the set, unplayable, like all of them unplayable. That would be kind of silly.
Sorry, I just noticed this actually doesn't have a rarity.
No, it does. Mark. It's just on Direwolf, when they gave it to Merc, they forgot they gave it the legendary gem, but the Peach Ape has confirmed that it's legendary.
Okay.
So otherwise it would have been cool. But so anyways, back to my idea about how I think a lot of these cards, at least we've only seen 3 of them, so we can't say about all of them, but so far all 3 of them have been decent if you can't play them on 4. Whereas if you can't play Roland on 4, you can presumably play it later with a removal spell attached to get value. If you can play Diana on 4, you don't really mind because Diana draws you a card and you presumably can do something else as well. And if you can't play Rindra on 4, you can play on like 5 or 6, then you can hold up a fast spell, which can trigger its ability to dodge torch or whatever. So the other thing about Rindra that I think is really good is that I think it synergizes really well with Felrock, the other card that has heavy influence for Fel. So like if you're going heavy influence for Fel and for Felrock, Rindra might just be a solid include there because they both discard cards, and stacking discard effects is really powerful. Before you only had 4 ways to make your opponent discard a card. Now you can have 8 powerful ways to make your opponent discard a card. And that means if you can play 2 of them a game, you can, taking 1 card out of their hand might not be the most impactful thing. But if you can start like ripping multiples every game, like 2 or 3 cards every game, they're going to have a lot less resources to deal with things. The nice thing about Rindra is that, let's say like worst case scenarios, you play Rindra on 4, then the player just plays Torch next turn. So in that case, what I think is either Torch that turn or Seer on your turn. In that case, you're still getting a 2-for-1, right? You're still getting they lose a card from their hand and the removal spell, and you lost Rindra. So in the worst case scenario, the only thing you're losing is you're losing 2 or 3 power worth of tempo, which, depending on how you build your deck, may or may not be the end of the world. If it's not the end of the world, then Rindra is going to be absurd, in my opinion, because all you lose is just a little bit of tempo.
Yeah. Seems really good. And dare I say, really interesting with Haunting Scream.
Ooh.
Oh, man, you took the bait? Oh, nice.
Oh, no, wait. Oh, God. Wait. Haunting Scream doesn't cost... Sorry, Haunting Scream doesn't cost 2 anymore. I still think Haunting Scream costs 2 in my mind. Look, Haunting Scream costs 2, you play it on 2, and then you're attacking with a 4/7 lifesteal that makes your opponent discard a card, which
6/7?
A 6/7, yes. Haunting Scream cost... Maybe this cycle is the reason that they nerfed Haunting Scream as well, because this cycle is a bunch of absurd 4-drops. So like, I mean, if Haunting costs 2, we bring back Rindra as a 6/7, makes your opponent discard a card. That negates the downside of Haunting Scream, which is that it's card disadvantage, and it gives you a big lifesteal swing. But it costs 3 now, so it's garbage. Moving on, we have a new mechanic, which is been running for one of my favorite mechanics in the game already, and I haven't even played with it yet. It's called Plunder. Plunder is an action ability that when something is plundering, when a unit has summoned Plunder, you can transform a card in your hand. If the card in your hand is a non-power card, it will transform that into a sigil. If it's a multi-faction non-power card, it will randomly choose a sigil of one of its factions. If the target in your hand is a power card, it will transform into a treasure trove, which is the 2-cost draw a card way of slow card advantage that Direwolf likes to give us, ways to draw cards, but slowly to make it more balanced, which is a really good mechanic, by the way. Treasure Trove is an absurdly good mechanic.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
But Plunder, just to finish off, the implementation of Plunder is so powerful because it's sort of like controllable Pledge. You can turn any card in your hand into a card with Pledge, basically. Because, early game, the more powerful thing to do with it is going to be to take a card and make it a power. But like having the flexibility of being like, I have no power in hand, I need to turn my expensive card into power, or especially if you combine it with any card with Echo, right? Like turning Zoe into a fire sigil is just beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I think something to note about anything involving treasure troves is that treasure trove is generally much worse than any card in your deck. So when you're evaluating cards for Plunder, just keep that in mind. However, if you're talking about applications of this card, turning, a Jotun Hurler or a Grenadin you get off of a Granite Waystone, or a treasure trove even into a power, I think that those are all huge transformations and all extremely powerful. And I honestly, like, looking at some of these cards that have Plunder, I think they're really pushing it, honestly.
What happens if you choose a non-power card that doesn't have a faction? It can't become a sigil, right? What does it become? Does it become... Oh, factionless cards will transform into a sigil of your starting deck's factions. Again, at equal chance. Okay. They accounted for this, and they even put in the article, so that's just me not reading carefully.
Yeah, so like turning a treasure trove into a power, I think it's a pretty big deal. Yeah, so we have a few cards that have Plunder. I think there's the first one is a 1/1 for 1 that requires Primal Influence. It's flying Plunder. Flying Summon Plunder, rather. So I don't think that one's too good unless Majestic Skies is still a thing, but holy cow, Desert Alchemist. It's a 2-cost, 2/1, Deadly Ambush, single-time influence, Summon Plunder. I think that this card has a lot of potential.
It's Scorpion Wasp without flying, but cheaper, and has, fixing, and also can actually attack better, like, surprisingly. I think this card is absurdly good, in any control deck. If you're not playing like this card in your control deck, like, you also compare it to Desert Marshal from the past. Apparently deserts really like 2-power 2 attacker ambushers for some reason.
Yeah, they hide in the sands.
Well, but I just mean the specific stat line as well. But that is true. I guess they do hide in sands. That flavor, I didn't even notice the flavor. Look at you, Suny, being flavorful.
Obviously.
But no, this card is obscene. Like, holy crap! Like in any control deck, because control decks are also the ones that can take the best advantage of Plunder, right? Because they're the ones that are most likely to be playing these Zoes or these Jotun Hurlers that have the extra cards in hand to use, and the more powerful effect is to turn something into power. But, like, oh my goodness, this card is just so good. Like, it's got everything.
Well, I do think it's very good. I do think that its ceiling is not extremely high. Like, I think its floor is very high, and its average case is going to be very, very good. but I don't think it's going to like run away with games on its own. I'm not saying it's not going to need a nerf. It might need that, but
I don't think it's going to run away with games. But I mean, I feel like the comparison with my mind is like compare it to like Seer or Defiance, right? If you attached Summon Plunder to Defiance, like compared to Defiance, you made Defiance cost 1 more, but also could function as a Seek power effect, basically. Like, wow, I mean, this card looks just like absurdly good to me. Like it's really good removal. Now again, the upside to Plunder is going to be that you want to transform things into power, because into treasure troves is very slow. It's great flexibility though, obviously. Having being able to do that is better than not. But if you've played with Jack, you know that treasure troves are a real cost.
All right, next card, Beseech the Throne. Is there something you want to talk about here? It's a 2-cost, draw a card, then plunder. This doesn't seem great to me.
I kind of want to mention it in a sense, just to sort of discuss the plunder effect as well, because I think so the reason I want to bring this up is because as a mechanic, this is a 2-cost spell, which in factionless, draw a card, then plunder. You can sort of compare this to Seek Answers or Wrath of Caiaphas or Seek Power, even if you wanted to look at comparisons, or Petition for that matter. A factionless way to sort of fix with potentially doing something else. This card shows that plunder by itself, as like, without the unit attached to it, is not really that good, because what are you going to do with this? Play it, and then it's kind of just slow. And if you're using it to, as sort of a Seek Answers, it's just a slower Seek Answers, because Seek Answers allows you to draw a random non-power from your deck, and Treasure Trove is effectively a random non-power from your deck, but for additional 2 cost. So, and the real problem with Seek Answers is that you could Seek Answers into Seek Answers. And the problem with Beseech the Throne is that you're always Seek Answering into Seek Answers here. You're always paying the tax. So the powerful part of Plunder is that you want to do the fixing part of it. And so if you're going to play a spell for fixing, you might as well just play Seek Power by itself instead of paying double with potentially upside of paying 4 to draw a card.
All right, and the last card that has Plunder that we'll talk about is a 2/1 for 1 that has 1 Justice Influence requirement, and it has Summon Plunder, Crown Patroller. I mean, I don't think Plunder's going to be necessarily the best in aggressive decks, but 2/1s that have abilities, we've seen those do a lot of work in the history of Eternal.
I think it'll be fine in aggressive decks, especially because, we have Jack, right? This card works with Jack. It turns a card into a sigil. That's what Jack wants, is more sigils. So 2/1 that does a thing. It's good enough. It's also a mage. There could have a mage combo deck involving reducing all the card cost of mages by 1, but I think it's fine. We actually have one more Plunder card, and it's part of this is part of one of my favorite sub-themes of the set. It's Gleeful Firebrand. This sub-theme set is also 5 cost spells matter, cards that cost 5 or more. So Gleeful Firebrand is 1 in a fire for a 0/3, and whenever you play a spell that costs 5 or more, deal 3 damage to an enemy, and it has Summon Plunder. So unlike the previous card, which is an aggressive 1-drop, this is a defensive 1-drop. It only really matters late in the game, and early in the game it's a 0/3 blocker. The power of this card is that plundering means that you get more power. Power allows you to get to your 5-cost card sooner. Getting your 5-cost card sooner turns this card, if you even get 1 effect off, you get a torch for free. If you get 2, you get double torch. If it blocks a unit and they trade it with like a combat trick or a torch, you get a 1-for-1. Seems like a fine card. And more importantly, there's 2 other cards that have been spoiled so far that have 5 cost spells matter. And that means that we're going to get some good expensive spells, which means volatility. That's right. My favorite card.
I think something important to note about Gleeful Firebrand is it's kind of like, what if volatility could also draw power, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So the thing is that if you play volatility before you play a Plunder card, you suddenly have a bunch of extra cards in hand that you can turn to power. That seems also really good. So I'm excited for this. There's 2 other cards that have been spoiled with this text I said earlier, but they're not very good. So we're just gonna skip over them for right now. So we have another return. We have a returning mechanic, one that we didn't actually think was going to come back, because Direwolf said that there were issues with it, but I guess they think they've solved the issues. And so we're going to have Revenge return. Revenge is when you play it, if it's a spell, it's when you play it. If it's a unit, it's when it dies, but it shuffles back in your deck in the top 10 cards, and then it gains Destiny. So this card that looks super hype is called Mobilization. It's 3 primal for a spell with Revenge, and it says play 2 1/2 Stampeding Beasts. So it's a slower, better assembly line.
Yeah, in a faction that probably doesn't want assembly line quite as much, but yeah, it is definitely a really interesting one. This is going to take some experience with the card in order to be able to really evaluate how good it is.
I mean, I think the card looks nuts. On just one axis, can I just mention that this card by itself reduces the cost of Witching Hour by 6. So I love Witching Hour. I think this card is actually going to be very good. 1/2s are better than 1/1s. Shocker, I know. And making 2 of them, if this card didn't have Revenge, it probably would still see play. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, 1/2s are great at blocking. I mean, something to keep in mind is if you have a 5/7, that's a big unit, right? But you attack into a horde of 1/2s, it only kills 2 of them.
I know,
so 1/2s.
It's ridiculous how good that 1/2s are. If you attack with a 3/3 and they block with 3 1/2s, you kill 1 unit.
All right, our next card is Shared Vision. This one's an interesting one. It costs 3, but has quadruple primal influence. It's a spell with Revenge. Exhaust 2 of your units to give the top card of your deck Destiny. Now, unless you know what the top card of your deck is, this might not do a whole ton. I mean, you might just be making a power Destiny, but you do get to draw the card under it, and it has Revenge, which makes for some really interesting stuff. You do have to have 2 units in play in order to play it, so it comes at a pretty high cost, but this definitely seems like the type of thing you would want to pair with, I don't know, Reread?
Well, you can also pair it with, I don't know, Excavate or Second Sight. Since it costs quad primal anyways, you're probably not playing it on 3, especially because you have to have 2 units to play anyways. So if you play it on 5 with Second Sight or play it on 4 with Excavate, then suddenly you get to choose what card gets Destiny, especially with Second Sight, right? Like put back, I don't know, Kairos maybe, give that Destiny. That seems pretty good. But I think the card's mostly going to be a meme. I think Direwolf correctly decided to, give it a lot of conditions because it's very powerful and would probably be absurd if it became like a tier 0 deck. So I like that it's there, but I'm glad that it's not too pushed.
It strikes me as a card that would not be fun if it was the center of competitive play.
Yeah. So next card is a simple removal spell that's going to be great and limited and great and constructed. It's a 1 and a fire for a slow spell, decay, deal 2 damage. So they gave us char, but slow, and now it has decay instead. So the reason this card is great and a lot better than char even, is that use it on a big unit, it becomes a smaller unit. So you can play it on X3s and they become X1s, right? If you play it on Jack, it becomes a 0/1. And that matters for both recursion effects and also because it makes it not useless if your opponent's playing a bunch of bigger things, because you can at least get some amount of value off of it. What do you think, Suny, of chemical rounds?
I'm actually going to go out on a limb here and say that I think Char is better. I think that being a fast spell and having the option of where you want to point the damage is more relevant.
Okay.
But I mean, obviously the appeal is here for decay, right? So we'll have to see how it works out. But I think that in fire decks that are playing this type of card, you don't care that the unit is smaller. Like you just want to kill it, like attacking a 2/2 into a 4/4 and then finishing it off with a Char or this. I think that the fast speed is more relevant for an ability for a card like this than decay would be.
I mean, so the important thing to know is that in Expedition, we probably won't. I mean, we could, but I expect that we won't have Char and this thing at the same time. So we'll have to play with this, right? Direwolf will want us to play with the new toys, but also, Suny, fire decks exist that aren't all super aggro low to the ground. There's mid-range fire decks, control fire decks. There are other types of decks that
exist. This blasphemy? Let's look at these next 2 cards. I'm pretty sure aggro decks are the only things that exist in Eternal. Okay, Trickshot Ruffian. 1 cost, 1/2, single justice requirement. It's a gunslinger. Summon, you may give another unit plus attack health equal to your Justice Influence and Lifesteal this turn. So you can imagine playing this on turn 4 of a mono Justice deck, giving something +4/+4 in Lifesteal until end of turn. That seems like, well, I mean, look, pre-combat combat tricks are not the most insane, but there's a lot of potential here. It's a 1-drop, but it's also something that gives some explosiveness later on in the game.
And the other benefit is that it gives Lifesteal, right? So like the pre-combat trick is kind of also not its best because, you attack in and that leaves you open on the backswing and, the opponent is not going to block and then they can attack you back. Whereas this card means even if they, attack you back, you've gained a bunch of life. So you move out of range of being in danger. I feel like this card is most comparable to the Oni, the 3-cost 3/3 Oni that summons to give a unit +3/+3 that turn. And if you played against that card does a lot of work when you see it in play. And, it's like, oh God, that hit me for a lot. This card looks to be probably a fair bit better because it's cheaper, so you get better tempo. You can play this and another card in the same turn. And it has sort of a higher a higher ceiling. Although it kind of has a slightly lower floor in that, if you only have one Justice, it's only 1/1. But I think even if you only have 2 Justice influence, this card is still better than getting +3/+2. I think +2/+2 in lifesteal is overall better than +3/+3. So I think this card is going to be really good. And it's just another good 1-drop, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of applications with Mastery also. You mentioned the Drill Sergeant. That's what it was used most for.
I mean, play this with Kozin. I love Kozin.
Kozin's double Justice. It might be kind of tricky. But, I mean, something
you
like
only need
Shenra.
+2/+2. Only need +2/+2.
Oh, I guess so.
Maybe I've got Kozin on the brain because our next card is a mono fire card that Suny wishes he could have had at the ECQ. This card is Volatile Grenadin. It is 2 power, 2/2 with triple fire, which means that you probably can't play it on turn 2 though. But you play on turn 3 and something else. Volatile Grenadin has a summon ability. The enemy player must choose. Give Volatile Grenadin +3/+3, or it deals 4 damage to them. So either it's a 2-cost 5/5, or it's a 2-cost summon, deal 4 damage to them. So it's either a half a Jack or a 5/5, with no discard effect, Lily.
Yeah, the thing to note here that is it is your opponent's choice. So if they have something like if they have an Annihilate or something, they're never going to take the damage. They're just going to make it a 5/5 and kill it. But I still think that both of those effects are very, very scary. I mean, you can play 2 of these on turn 4, and all of a sudden, what does your opponent do? Do they face down 2 5/5s, or do they take 8 damage, or some combination of the two? It's probably only a tool for the mono fire decks, but it seems like a very, very explosive tool.
I mean, if this card gets annihilated, you don't really care because you've traded 2 power for 2 power. Oh no, whatever will I do as an aggro deck? Trading evenly is not exactly what fire decks want to do, but that's still not the end of the world. I think the real downside of this card is, some sort of like Sandstorm Titan, right? Something that you give it the buff, and then there's just a big blocker they can't get through. But that's not that likely either. So I think this card is going to be really good. Compared to Endra, compared to Jack, looks powerful to me.
Yeah, the real downside is that you can't play it on turn 2, right? It's a 2-drop that you can't play on turn 2, but you can probably play on turn 3.
With a 1-drop. Wow.
Yeah, with a 1-drop.
That seems pretty good to me. So their next card is not likely to see play, but is potentially a combo card. It is also the first of our new our last new mechanic that we know about. It's called Surge. Surge is whenever you gain an influence, do this effect. It differs from a power in 2 notable ways. One is that you can gain influence on other things such as Reap. Reap gives you 5 influence at once, which triggers Surge 5 times. If you play a Sigil, you get 1 Surge. If you play a Banner, you get 2 Surges. Memento Mori also gives you 5. Carve It gives you like 9 Surges over the course of 2 turns, So there's a lot of things going on with Surge compared to Empower. So this is Severin. It is 6 Shadow for a 5/7. And its Surge effect is to play 3/1 Piercing Grief with charged Lifesteal and Revenge that dies at the end of your turn. So I feel like the combo with Severin is you play Severin on 6, and then you play Reap, and then you play a second Reap, and then you attack for 30, and then you win the game. Sunny, what do you think about Severin combo?
Yeah, I don't think Severin's very good.
Okay, let's move on then.
I think that Surge is probably fine, and there are going to be some applications with Reap, which is, of course, the easiest way to enable these types of things. But I just don't think a 6-drop is necessarily where it's at.
I think there's a fun meme, and I wanted to bring it up, especially because we don't have that many Surge cards revealed, especially not the ones that, could be absurd. But we do have some interesting things going on, including, potentially a fun meme combo deck. But we have another card, Flameheart Paladin. Is another card that Sunny would have considered, but might have not played at the ECQ. Flameheart Paladin is 2 and a fire for a 1/3 Sentinel with Surge, again +2 attack this turn. So just to go back to the Reap combo, you play Flameheart Paladin, the next turn you play Reap, it becomes a 11/3, and then you play Ryujin's Choice to give it double damage, or Gifted Battle or whatever, and then you can attack for 22, which is almost lethal. So
yeah, you can also play a dual faction, like you can play a Banner and
like a regular Stone Star deck. You play a Banner and you attack for 5. Whatever. I want to go big or go home. But no, I mean realistically, in the early game it's a 5/3, in the late 5/3 / 3/3, in the late game it's a 1/3. It makes top decks terrible because if they're power, you have to play them to attack with it. If it's this, you just play a bad unit, and if it's power, you want to be able to hold cards in hand to go for the market or with Jack. And this guy means that you can't hold a Sigil in hand for the market or for Jack. So it kind of has some downsides there. But it has a different sort of upside, which is that if you play Flameheart Paladin on turn 4, you play a banner, then you can reweave, and then you can bond with Scourstone Sentinel, which is a 9-cost Sentinel with bond. Because this is a 2-cost unit that can get big with its surge, you can bond out a 9-cost unit to then reweave into Kairos, and then because Flamer Paladin's still huge, you then get to draw a billion cards and, get some Deaths and probably win the game off that. So I think that's the likely combo with Flameheart Paladin is reweave bond shenanigans.
First of all, it's Flameheart Patroller. You said the name wrong like 6 times. And we're
whatever, Paladins, Patrollers. Are you saying Paladins can't be Patrollers? Look, if he wants to be a Paladin, he can be a Paladin.
Okay, so I think that this card is worse than like Cookmaster. I think that in Expedition, you just don't have the influence to make it really strong. Like you don't have the dual faction powers to make it really good. And in Throne, there are just better 3-drops, better 2-drops. So I don't think that this is going to see play unless it's in some wacky combo. And everything you've described to me has way too many moving parts.
I do like some moving parts, but yeah, I mean, probably won't do things, but I want to do things because it can do some cool things. But I expect other Surge cards, I mean, imagine there's like a 7-cost Surge card that like draws you a card or something. Oh god, that'd be disgusting.
Yeah, there will be cool things for you to do. You don't have to look this hard for
Surge, gain an influence, go infinite. I bet you someone at Direwolf designed that just for a laugh, or like to see if they could break the like internal testing servers or whatever. I'd be willing to bet some money on that.
Yeah. Okay. So next we have another cycle. It looks like a cycle of really interesting spells. These look like they're pretty powerful. You have them listed as XXYY spells, and as soon as I explain the card, I think that'll become clear. So Bartholow's Keepsake is a 3-cost double shadow card. It's a spell. Draw a unit, weapon, or power from your choice from the top 4 cards of your deck and bottom the rest. And then if you have Justice, if it costs 3 or less, play it instead. So it's a card that you can play for 3 double shadow, and it does something, and it has a bonus if you have double Justice as well.
Yeah, so I think this is a really cool way of making influence matter, but also having, a generic base case that's not the end of the world, right? It's, if you just play it normally, it's bad scheme, and bad scheme is pretty bad. But I do think it has some upside there because being able to dig for just a merchant, right? If you play it and you pull a merchant out, it can do some good work, or if you play it and get a power, being secret pages, slow if you need to is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Obviously, you wouldn't want to play slow secret pages, but this card isn't slow secret pages. It's slow secret pages as a flexible option. So I think the flexibility of this card is potentially there. Because also important to note is that, if you only have like say 8 or 10 units that cost 3 or less in your deck, say if you're playing like FJS or whatever, you don't have that many hits. You only have 25 power plus say 10 units that cost 3 or less, which is not enough to guarantee a card that costs 3 or less. But, it can just draw any unit, right? So if you just happen to play it and only draw your Varo or your Karia or your Rezon, that's fine. It's not exactly what you want, but the fact that it doesn't do literally nothing, whereas if you like miss on Calibrate, it's the end of the world. It's like, oh god, I just lose the game. So I feel like this card is comparable to Calibrate in a lot of ways, where you want to probably play a similar, albeit slightly lesser amount than Calibrate, but it has upside in that if you're playing other things, it has a better fallback. The downside, of course, is that it costs 3 times as much. Suny is not the biggest fan of this card, but I think it's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. I don't think that this card is great because it has some uncertainty baked into it, right? You're limited to drawing units, weapons, or powers, and you don't know what they're going to be. And also, the uncertainty isn't balanced by some sort of payoff. Like, for example, if you got to play the card that you got off of it, if it costs like 5 or something, then you get some power to balance out the uncertainty that you have when you play this card. I just think that like there's too much going on here. You need to have a pretty tough influence of shadow, justice, and then you also have some uncertainty in what card you're going to get. And then like being able to play it isn't like, it might not be the card that you want to play in that situation. And it also doesn't hit spells. Like I think there's just too many strikes against it for it to be something that I'm super excited about. This next one, however, holy cow.
Oh god, this card is absurd.
Cost double justice.
This I mean, but you guys know what the card is, but trust me, it is absurd.
So 1 cost double justice, bubble shield. Give one of your units Aegis. double Primal, you gain an Aegis fast spell. So if you guys played Eternal way back when, there used to be, well, there still is a card called Protect, but it used to cost 1. And boy, did it give problems to decks. Sandstorm Titan plus Protect, Seraph plus Protect. These are classic plays. Martial Ironthorn plus Protect.
Cerso plus Protect if in a free faction deck. But yeah, so Protect was absurd, and there's a reason that it got nerfed to 2 is because it just did so much for so little. This card does cost an extra Justice, but the thing is, compared to, say, Bartholow's Keepsake, this card doesn't need you to play Primal, right? If you're playing Haru, it's obviously a lot better, right? You know, free face, it just is worth not nothing. It's worth a significant amount. But just in a Combre deck, whatever, Protect is back, you know, the low cost of having extra Justice influence. You know, you can't play it on turn 1, but why would you want to play on turn 1 anyways, you know? I mean, look at Alessi. Alessi now has Protect back, right? Alessi with Bubble Shield, oh my goodness. There already was, like, I mean, a lot of Alessi decks already were 3 faction anyways, right? They were playing Primal for reasons that I can't remember at the time, but I think they were playing Primal, you know, that, I mean, then you can get the Phase Aegis too, and I mean, this card looks absurd. We also, I mean, we have the Vow for it, we've got a couple Justice Vows. I mean, well, I guess just Justice cards in general plus this, right? Oh god, this card looks great. So yeah, me and Sunny are both in agreement on this card, whereas we had some different opinions earlier, but we're both in agreement here that this card is an A.
I think this card is slightly worse than Protect. And someone mentioned about slotting 4 of these into each deck. I actually think that this is a pretty good market card, just because you don't want to be stuck with 3 of this effect in your hand, and nothing to put it on. There can be some weird situations. But also keep in mind that you can't just give yourself Aegis, right? You have to have a unit in play. You can't target your opponent's unit to give yourself Aegis. So if someone plays, you know, a Sabotage on an empty board or something, you can't protect your hand. And that's something that Protect was able to do. So I think it is a little worse than Protect, but that being said, I think it's very, very good at protecting your assets, especially in Expedition, where the removal is going to be more expensive. Like protecting against a 2-cost spell versus protecting against a 4-cost spell, that's a big difference.
Cost and Double Justice is not nothing, right? It means that it's going to be harder to play it with things like Jack, for instance. But even then, you know, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that difficult to achieve. So if you have to play Roland on 5 because you didn't get the influence on time, you can play Roland and hold up Bubble Shield to protect your Roland from any removal spells, you know. Protect your Diana, although that's less relevant because Diana already got you your value. But, you know, if there's any other good Justice cards that have this part of this 4-cost massive influence cycle, then this card also gets increased in value because those cards are likely to be played on turn 5 because of influence reasons, and then you can hold the Bubble Shield to protect it. So you're going to be seeing lots of bubbles coming up. There are going to be a lot of blown bubbles. Go watch some SpongeBob blowing all these bubbles.
I think there's one more thing that's important to note, and you kind of touched on it, is that this is a card, it says 1 in the top left corner, but that's not actually its cost. This and things like Predator's Instinct, they don't really cost 1. They make the unit that you want to play it on cost 1 more, but with an added level of protection or with killer. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't really wrap their head around. Like when people were playing Grodov Stranger and Predator's Instinct, those Predator's Instincts weren't 1-drops. They were really 6-drops because you had to play them with Grodov's Stranger. So that's a long roundabout way of saying that the influence requirements is not going to be difficult. When you are playing your 4-cost unit on turn 5, you probably have double Justice if you're playing any Justice at all.
Yeah, I mean the only time it wouldn't be is if you're playing Jack, but then again, if you're trying to protect your Jack, you'd be playing that on turn 5 because you need to play 4 plus 1, which means that you're more likely to have double Justice at that point anyways. So
right, and Jack also gets its value up front, so it
doesn't matter as much, you know. Does. I mean, you know, the way to look at it is cards like Bubble Shield, Protect, and like Predator's Instinct, but especially the Bubble Shield, is that you can look at it as sort of a flexible card, whereas you can look at it as protecting onboard things someday, but try to plan for it being the whole play a card that you want to protect with 1 power left up, like play your 4-drops on turn 5, you know, do this thing that Sunny mentioned, right? So you can sort of has the flexibility of being just like protecting things randomly, but also like gear towards playing the card a little bit later to hold up your removal, your protection for their removal. Yeah, so
I would also like to point out one more thing, and might be patting myself on the back too much, but I actually, the ETS Invitational I won way back was actually the ETS where Combre with Protect was a huge thing. Everyone was playing Combre with Protect, and I was playing a Stonescar aggro deck, and the way that I got around Protect, this is the point of it, is that if you're trying to beat people that are playing these Protect effects, combat tricks like Finest Hour, or in my case, Rapid Shot, are really good ways of dealing with it. Now, Rapid Shot cost 1 back then, so it's a bit of a different thing. But like Spiteful Strike, just any combat trick makes it more difficult for these Aegises to matter. So if this starts showing up in the metagame big time, which I think it probably will, keep that in mind. There are ways to play against Aegis.
Yeah, the other thing to note about that idea is that, if you're just playing no removal, then the Aegis doesn't really matter. So if you play just units, like Suny said, you can get there. Also, I just noticed, by the way, literally just now, is that Bartholow's Keepsake is a rare, but Bubble Shield is an uncommon, which means this is not a cycle. This is just a sub-theme of the set.
I feel like I've seen some cycles that don't quite have their rarities mixed up. Like or don't have their rarities lined up. It's rare. It's not a common thing. It's not a common occurrence. But I think I've seen things that look like cycles where their rarities don't quite line up. So I'm not quite sure. Well, it definitely looks like it's going to be a cycle, but maybe there's one for spells and one for fast spells also. So we'll see.
Anyways, so these are the spoilers we have for today. If you're lucky, if you're good little boys and girls and non-boys, non-girls, we might have some more spoilers for you in the future. But I hope you enjoyed. We will get to a wrap in a second. But our what's it called again? Argent something? Set 9. Eternal, we only think of things by numbers.
Depths.
But Argent Depths.
It's literally next to all of these cards. It says Eternal, then it says Argent Depths. Come on, man.
I can't read. What do you think I am? A card game player? But no, Argent Depths looks like it's going to be a cool set. But yeah, I'm excited for Argent Depths.
Next week, we should have the full set also. So be excited for that episode of FECast. All right, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Good luck if you are trying to get these cards early with the preview bundle. I don't know the official name of it, but if you're playing with these cards early, have fun with them. Good luck with them. And do you have anything you'd like to plug, Stormblessed?
You guys should all be playing lots and lots of volatility decks because that card is fun. In a non-volatility related manner, you should watch the Barbarian Camp streamers. Like, you could watch Moriata Bite because he's a cool streamer, If GT ever streams again, if Batteries ever streams again, they stream intermittently. Collector, I know, sometimes does secret streams, but all good dudes, and they produce good content. So go check them out.
Isn't Nick back?
Oh yeah. Nick also back. I forgot. Yeah, and Roush is back. I don't know why. I forgot him. But yeah, and Roush he probably does the most regular Eternal content. He's been streaming Gauntlet. He's been speedrunning it. He got the world record in Gauntlet, which is it's still the funniest thing. But yeah, he's also a person to check out too. So go do that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the FECast. Until next time, stay in the friend zone.
Friends of Eternal is awesome, but you know what's even more awesome? Our amazing patrons over at patreon.com. That's right, Friends of Eternal now has a Patreon where you can help support the content and initiatives of Friends of Eternal. If you enjoy FECast and you enjoy the Piloting Club and you want to join the people that make all this possible and sustainable, be sure to head over to patreon.com/friendsofeternal and consider donating. Every little bit does help. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time on FECast.